536 Myriad Codex Plane. Edward soon arrived at his destination. He looked into the screen before him, which showed him what the outside of this plane looked like. There were countless ships of different sizes and shapes parking outside. A platform floated in the void served as the entrance. It really is a public library, muttered Edward. If the Abyss Realm is the ultimate place for commerce and exchange in the astral realm, then the Myriad Codex Plane is a public library with important knowledge, but not so important that top planes would do whatever is necessary to conquer it. Over the years, the Myriad Codex Plane had become a neutral ground, and top planes like the Wizard or Titan planes agreed to leave it alone and ensure none of them controlled it. Edward's floating city was in invisible mode, so no one noticed him. He parked the thing in a pocket dimension before taking out a ship and flying to the entrance. Before stepping out, Edward changed his clothes and modified his aura to resemble more of a wizard from the wizard plane. From the information Hermione provided, the power system in the wizard plane made all wizards contain a powerful life force field that radiated intense radiation. As such, as long as a wizard stays too long in an area, the creatures around them will mutate one way or the other. Edward headed to the platform, where many people were coming and going. He followed the property procedure, including registering his name, identity as a wizard, and tier. Finally, he met with a lizardman. Token, asked the lizardman directly, and Edward handed him the token he had received from his variant. The creature scanned the token and said, "Ordinary visitor, viable for only 3 months. What are the higher levels, and how do you get them?" asked Edward. The lizardman looked at him. Normally, he would not have answered, but since this person was tier 8 and from the wizard plane, he gave some more information. Ordinary, elite, professional, and VIP, each with a longer visitation time and access to higher tier knowledge. If you want to increase your level, you must buy soul stones or exchange knowledge. However, soul stones can only acquire a pass to the professional level. If you want VIP access, you have to exchange knowledge. "Thank you for the news," said Edward as he handed the lizardman a bag with countless soul stones. There are different types of energy in the astral realm, and different power systems use different energy. However, soul energy is one of the most common powers used by 99% of life forms in the astral realm. As such, soul stones, which are condensed and purified soul energy, are mainly used for monetary exchanges. Edward can manufacture clones like candy, and with the recent ability to convert mana into soul energy, he did not lack soul stones. The lizardman's eyes shone brilliantly after seeing what was inside the interdimensional bag, so he swiftly put it away. Edward proceeded to a teleportation enchantment. A bright light enveloped him, and when he opened his eyes, he found himself in another room with people around. He immediately looked around and analyzed the situation. "I don't feel stuffy or restricted, so the level of this plane should be tier 9. There seems to be no energy in the environment, which is odd." However, after thinking about it momentarily, Edward realized it was probably done on purpose. Without energy in the environment, the destructive ability of most spells or attacks is drastically reduced. Furthermore, people will have a slow recovery in such an environment. Someone manufactured such an environment to minimize fighting and conflict. Edward followed the attendant out of the teleportation area. As soon as he exited, he saw a magnificent tower that rose from the ground all the way to the clouds. At the center of this tower were the words Astral Library written in the universal language of the astral realm. Edward did not observe long before he headed to the nearest library branch. Based on the information he gathered, he needed to be a VIP if he wanted to reach the central library at the center of this plane. As he flew to his destination, he did not stop observing around while also remaining on guard. His mind was already connected to the floating city, ready to take action at a moment's notice. This world was vibrant despite the lack of energy. Races from different planes, countless power systems, and knowledge, all concentrated in one area. If not for the fact he did not want any uncontrollable variables, Edward would have read everyone's mind and stole knowledge. After entering the library, he searched for books about the savant race. As expected, there were none. So, without hesitation, he talked to the main librarian about acquiring a professional level token. He paid the needed soul stones before heading closer to the main library. The place he headed to was called the secondary library, and Edward once again searched for news about the savant race. Ultimately, he had to acquire a VIP pass by exchanging knowledge. The level required for a pass should be on par with something a tier 8 powerhouse would create or some lost secrets of the astral realm. Edward exchanged knowledge about aura and used the bare minimum knowledge to get the pass. Afterward, he headed to that tower at the center. He had no problem entering with his new VIP pass. The inside of the tower did not look too extravagant. Instead, it looked like an ordinary library in a modern world. Edward found a seat in the sitting area, and a holographic screen appeared before him. He used it as a computer and input the information he wanted. Edward frowned because the information about the savant race was too little. It was a picture of this humanoid race that was a little over 1 meter tall, but they had a massive head. The savant race was one of the oldest races in the entire astral realm. The mission of their civilization was to gather knowledge from all planes and create the ultimate library. However, the Magus race wanted their knowledge and attacked the race. Ultimately, the savant race survived the attack, but they disappeared from the world. It was not until a long time after the Magus race disappeared that they resurfaced. However, their contact with the astral realm has been minuscule since then. Edward focused on a small passage on the screen. The savant race continued their mission of gathering knowledge. However, they use more secretive means. There are rumors the Astral Library is one of the savant race's subsidiaries. Edward squinted his eyes as he understood many things. If this information is true, many things could be explained, like why the library has not been conquered. These top planes might be trying to see if they could find the savant race by using the Astral Library. Edward stood from his chair and went to see the librarian. She was a beautiful woman who resembled humans. However, Edward noticed small wings on the back of her ears. "Excuse me, how can I help you?" asked the librarian as she placed the book in her hand. "Do you have any more information on the savant race?" asked Edward, who was on the highest alert level. He did not know whether his question was taboo and would cause problems, so he was ready to fight or run away at any moment. "Oh, it's another fool," the librarian sighed. "Pardon me, do you know what the savant race represents?" "Power," replied Edward directly, making the librarian surprised. "Yes. Anyone who can gain access to their library will gain unimaginable power. So, everyone wants to find them, but no one has succeeded. At least, not publicly." "I see," replied Edward, slightly dejected. "Is there anything you can tell me?" "There is a prophecy on the savant race's whereabouts," continued the librarian. "The invisible world, hidden right underneath the smallest things." Edward frowned after hearing this divination. "Can you tell me the original language this divination originated from?" "Hehe, you're quite intelligent," commented the librarians. Translated languages often cannot express certain meanings, so many people began to study the original language of this divination to see if they could find something. Sadly, there has been no news of someone discovering the savant race. Edward got the information he wanted and returned to his reading area. 537. Hidden World. The original diviner who made this prophecy was a unique race apparently born from the concept of fate itself. After seeing the description, Edward could not help but think of the concept of innate creatures from the Xiangxia stories he used to read. If I remember correctly, the elder gods from my plane are also innate creatures that Krona created at the beginning of the universe to help her stabilize the world. So, is this diviner an elder god from some unknown plane? There was not much information on the diviner. Luckily, there were records of the language of his home world. So, Edward downloaded the information he wanted for later use. He did not dare learn and interpret this divination in a place like this. His senses warned him that someone had been secretly observing him ever since he had asked the librarian for the prophecy's original language. Edward calmed down while keeping the highest level of alert. He did not immediately leave but spent the next few days searching for knowledge about different things in the library. To the outside world, he was not someone who came directly for the savant race but was interested in many other things. Once he finished, Edward calmly left this plane and returned to his ship. "Someone is following us," said Morgana. "I'm aware. Do you want to kidnap them and see where they come from?" "No, let's return home as soon as possible." After his command, the ship disappeared, losing the followers. Without hesitation, the floating city secretly returned to the Empire. Edward did not leave but focused on learning the language even better than the natives. The learning process was easy since the knowledge he downloaded from the Astral Library gave him everything he needed to learn this language. "I think I know where the savant race is," muttered Edward. "Yes, the quantum realm," nodded Morgana. "The invisible world, hidden right underneath the smallest things." Edward immediately has his suspicions after hearing this prophecy, but the proof he needs is the last word "things." In this language, the word used can also be translated as particle. In other words, this prophecy can be translated as a world hidden under the smallest particles. "So, how will we enter the quantum realm?" asked Morgana. "I doubt space magic will take us there, so will you invent PIM particles?" "No need to go through all that trouble. Shrinking magic should be more than enough. One of the highest security prisons of the Empire is shrunk to a size smaller than atoms, so shrinking magic is well developed. If he takes time to modify things, he should be able to enter the quantum realm using it." "True, so our only trouble is finding the savant race in the quantum realm," nodded Morgana. "Luna should go with us. Hopefully, her divination will not have any problems after reaching there." Edward frowned as he sent her a message to prepare for this endeavor. "You should feel relieved now," said Morgana. "Finding them is the first step. The real test is whether they will have the information we need, and if they do, can we execute it? Since Krona warned you to see them, they should have the information we wanted," Morgana reassured. "As for executing the information they gave, you should remember who you are." "Yes, there is no need to spook myself out before finding them," nodded Edward before starting his work. His plan was not only to shrink himself but the entire floating city. He did not know the danger of the quantum realm, so it would be best if he had ways to protect himself. Edward accessed all the Empire's knowledge about shrinking magic and analyzed it to create an enchantment that would take him to the quantum realm. The entire process took more than a week. "Are you ready?" asked Edward. "Yes, I've created an anchor to this place so we can return in case of an accident." "Very well," nodded Edward. "Let's do a few tests first." He first used a few clones and sent them to and back from the quantum realm. The process had no problems except for one: he could not record what these clones saw in the process. "That's odd," commented Edward. "Could it be some form of natural protective mechanism of the quantum realm? Or is it because they are clones and their souls are fundamentally flawed? This is not the time to be thinking too deeply about this. He first took certain precautions to ensure his memories of the experience wouldn't be affected. Finally, Luna and Edward shrink themselves until they enter the quantum realm. The voyage was turbulent, and once they reached their destination, the floating city actually crashed as the anti-gravity system failed, along with all other flying systems. "What's going on?" asked Luna. "Morgana, give me a diagnostic check." "Underway," replied the little elf. A few seconds later, a holographic screen floated before Edward. "Our energy core and all our enchantments are malfunctioning." "Malfunctioning is the wrong word, they are working at the lowest capacity." Edward nodded, and Morgana continued. "The situation is similar to how we must adapt to the laws of other universes after our travels. This would explain why I'm having trouble controlling my mana," said Luna. "Anything more?" asked Edward. "I have discovered that our body is adapting to the quantum realm, but it's not the same for the floating city or any other magical artifacts we brought," continued the elf. "In this situation, we might have to continue our journey without the city's aid." "Oh, haven't you found a solution?" "I have been trying to change the frequency of the energy core to adapt to the environment. However, we have little to no information, so unless we are lucky, this process could take decades, if not hundreds of years." This was not the news Edward wanted to hear. He looked at Luna and said, "Can you use your powers?" "I've been reduced to tier 2, so my power is very limited." "I'm no better than you, only tier 3, uttered Edward. "Morgana, calculate how long it will take us to return to our peak." "All right, sir." She scanned the magic core inside their heart and soul dimension. "According to my analysis, you must wait over a month." "That's not too long. We can take this time to analyze our surroundings," nodded Edward before he began repairing the floating city. He wanted to see if he could accelerate the city's adaptation. However, after a month, the situation got even worse. "Our strength is not recovering," said Luna with a frown. After reaching tier 4, their power stopped receiving, no matter what they did. It seems the quantum realm has some kind of limit. He immediately wanted to do all types of research, for example, the influence of the quantum realm on the soul, mana, aura, and spells, its influence at a genetic level on the human and other races' bodies, its effect on the soul flame and the soul dimension, and even how it affects things like hormonal growth. Sadly, this was not the time for this. "I think we might have to take the risk and venture out without the city's protection," said Luna. "You might be right." Edward was naturally cautious, but he also knew when not to be overcautious or let his paranoia get the best of him. So, after the two prepared some things, they left the floating city. They had a basic understanding of the surroundings, but now, it was time to travel outside of the small map they drew. 538 The savant race. Edward and Luna walked out of the floating city, observing their surroundings. This place was obviously a strange world. There were 9 suns in the sky, and upon closer observation, Edward was pretty sure they were living creatures. The two took a moment to take samples of the floral and fauna, marveling at the wonder of this strange realm. "So, do you have any clue?" asked Edward. Sadly, Luna shook her head. This place contained too much information. "What do you mean?" "Every time I try to divine something, it's like swimming in an ocean, and each drop is a vast quantity of information. So, it's impossible to find a single target." "Yes. Would it help with Morgana's help?" "It's useless. Luna has her own tower spirit or artificial intelligence. Although it was not on par with Morgana, it was still of the highest caliber. However, even with its help, she could not process all the information in the environment. This place is both hell and heaven for diviners. Divination magic will enter a new era if we can find a way to navigate all this information." Edward nodded before deciding to walk in one direction to see if they could encounter life and civilization. As they continued forward, they soon encountered an enormous creature. "Is that a yeti?" asked Luna. The creature resembled a yeti with its monkey-like appearance. But there were still many differences. It was at least 3 times the size of a normal yeti, standing at about 15 meters tall. It had extremely long legs, taking about 12 meters of its entire body. Lastly, its skin seemed to be made of rock, looking more like the combination of a yeti and an earth elemental creature. Edward noticed the creature was tier 3, but he did not attack or contact it. Instead, he read the latter's memories. "What did you find?" asked Luna. "His intelligence is similar to an animal. All his memories are of hunting, sleeping, reproducing, and defecating," replied Edward. "Oh, his poop seems valuable. Why did you say that?" "In his memories, he always sees humanoid creatures fighting for it," replied Edward as he organized the information he gathered. He condensed everything into a basic but usable area map based on the creature's hunting habitats. He raised his hand to condense a holographic map. "According to deduction, we have a higher chance of fighting intelligent life if we travel here," pointed in the northeast direction. Luna looked at the map and said, "I suddenly had a thought. Is it safe to teleport in this place?" "That's a good question," uttered Edward, who controlled a small purple rock a few meters from to fly in his hand. He cast a teleportation spell on the rock, which appeared in the distance. "It does not appear to be any problem, but the rock is an inanimate object, so we don't know what will happen to us for sure," commented Edward. "In that case, let's fly." The two flew to their destination, but they soon discovered another anomaly. Their flying speed was drastically reduced for their tier. Furthermore, the speed at which their mana was draining was also abnormal. "This place seemed to have many rules and restrictions," commented Edward. "Indeed, along with many mysteries," nodded Luna. They continued their journey, and they soon found a group that was resting. They looked like a caravan transporting something as they had a strange creature that acted as a vehicle. The group saw many humanoid creatures with different color skins, scales, and horns, but there were also a few humans. What's wrong? Asked Luna after seeing the frown on his face. I can't read these people's minds. Really? I can understand what they're saying through soul communication, but after entering their mind, I cannot find any memories. Even worse, I cannot enter past the first layer of their soul dimension. Is that so? You had no problem reading that strange beast's memories. Could it be the rules of this place to protect intelligent life forms? Analyzed Luna. Let's test your conjecture, said Edward as he used legilimency to read the transportation creature of this caravan. As expected, he had no problem reading its mind and memories. Your conjecture might be correct. The sampling size was too small to finalize things. After all, there is the possibility this group is special, and not all people in the quantum realm have this ability. What should we do next? Do you think we should secretly follow them? Asked Edward. No, follow my lead, said Luna. She cast a spell to change her appearance, making her hair disheveled and leaving a few burning marks on her clothes and body. Then, the invisible spell on them disappeared, and she fell from the sky before the group. The team immediately became on guard, taking out their weapons, including guns and swords. Where is this place? Did I succeed? Said Luna as she looked around. After seeing people around her, she also stood up while guarding against them. Who are you people? And where is this? NT $% $$ NT. Unknown language? Let's try another form of communication. Wait, why is my power weakening? She frowned, showing confusion, worry, and a slight fear. However, all these emotions quickly turned into calmness. She then used her soul to communicate directly through the mind. Who are you people? And where is this place? The group was surprised. They could now understand this weird human woman who had fallen out of the sky. However, no one answered her as they looked at a man who was almost 3 meters tall with red skin and a large sword in his hand. Are you their leader? Asked Luna. You can say that. Do you know where this place is? The leader did not immediately answer. Why did you fall from the air? I was in my lab doing an experiment, trying to prove the existence of the quantum realm. But things went out of control, and before I knew it, I was here. The leader momentarily paused. Good news for you, you've succeeded. Are you saying this is the quantum realm? That's one of its most common names, but yes? Really? Is this why my power is reducing? Are the rules of this place different from the material world? What's the explanation for such a phenomenon? You must be a mage, said the leader. Oh, sorry, I got carried away. Does this place have mages? Yes, although rare, they do exist. Scientists from the upper world are more common than mages, but many still exist. I see, nodded Luna. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Jessica Kana, and I am a spiritual mage. The name's Krovik. Sir Krovik, if you don't mind, could you tell me about this place? Said Luna. I can pay for your knowledge. Krovik's eyes lit up after hearing this. He nodded to her before looking at his men and giving them a signal. Everyone dispersed, but Luna could see they were still on guard. Regardless, Krovik began to introduce this place to her. That was easier than I anticipated, thought Edward a few minutes later. According to Krovik's narration, this place is controlled by 3 major factions, the Sun God religion/cult, the Tartarian Empire, and the Enlightened City. His focus was on the last one, the Enlightened City. According to the leader, that place is controlled by a race known as the Savant. In other words, Edward finally found them. He exhaled deeply. 539. Time Guardian Edward followed the group to the nearest city. He was in a daze throughout the journey, feeling a heavy weight lifted from his shoulder. Although finding the Savant race did not guarantee he could deal with the Time Guardians, he felt much better just by knowing about his enemy. After arriving at their destination, Luna separated from the group after compensating them and reuniting with Edward. The two began to visit this city, fact-checking much of the information Krovik provided them. For example, the power limit of this world is Tier 4 for all creatures but Tier 6 for technology, and no one can break that limit. This place reminded me of Hermione's system creation research, said Luna, and Edward nodded. The Konosuba world is the perfect embodiment of system creation power. The way the world is established is there are certain rules. For example, after killing creatures, you receive points to use to increase magical abilities. The quantum realm seems to be a very strict system, but the purpose of this system is still unknown. What's the plan? Do you want to head to the Enlightenment City immediately? No, let's fix the floating city first, replied Edward. His first step was to buy a few Tier 6 ships or magical artifacts. The process was much harder than anticipated since this place was the domain of the Sun God cult, which strictly controls all technology and powerhouses. However, money can buy anything. This place uses barter and soul stone as a monetary system, so Edward gets what he wants after spending lavishly on the black market. He dismantled these technologies and artifacts until he found the correct mana frequency that would properly allow his floating city to function. He did not take it with him but placed it in invincible mode. Although there was little chance the Savant race would be hostile to him, he needed to take precautions and not reveal this thing as of yet. The Savant race had connections to countless plans in the material world, so he did not want to risk revealing the floating city's existence yet. As such, he also did not bring it close to their territory. If they were in the material world, he was confident in the cloaking system of the city. Still, in this place, with a limit of Tier 6, his technological advantage was drastically reduced, especially before a race known for gathering knowledge of the entire astral realm. So, Edward embarked on their territory after creating an artifact that allowed him to use the city's power from a long distance. As the name implies, the Enlightenment City was an enormous city, but it was built on top of this giant mechanical spider-like construct with legs. There was an entrance, so Edward's ship headed in that direction. They soon discovered that the entrance required a test. They had to solve a puzzle, formula, or question before being granted access. There were many questions from every category, from science to magic, to understanding of soul, and to countless other power systems. Interesting, thought Edward before picking a question and answering, and Luna followed. The city was lively, full of different spaces, including certain creatures from the material world. He also saw many members of the savant race, who wore loose black robes on their short bodies. They had massive heads and floated in the air instead of walking. They reminded Edward of the Watchers from Marvel, except they were much shorter. After a short tour, they discovered this place was similar to the Myriad Codex plane, with countless libraries scattered all over the city and the main one at the center. Edward had to solve countless questions to reach the central library, which required solving an unsolvable question before he could meet the higher UPS of the savant race. Edward and Luna waited inside a room. According to the receptionist, he would meet the Grand Elder tomorrow morning. So, Edward waited until the next day when someone escorted him to a room with a large table. Opposite them was a savant race dressed in gold and white, with wisdom shining on the latter's eyes. The name is Corey. How may I address you? Edward Bones? I have to thank you for solving the bloodline sequence, said Great Elder Corey. We have been studying the curse the witch plane placed on the Magus race, and so far, our research has made little to no progress until you came. I'm glad I could help, nodded Edward. So, how are you finding this layer of the quantum realm? A very magical place, isn't it? This layer? There are other layers, asked Edward. Yes, this is only the first and most normal layer, the Great Elder nodded. Once you go to the deeper levels, the things you can see are truly beyond any normal mind to comprehend. Are the other layers less restrictive? That's correct. However, each of them has strange and sometimes baffling rules. If you have a chance to visit, you should be more careful. I see, nodded Edward as he figured out some things. For example, the savant race purposely chose to stay in this layer as a form of confrontation. In this place, even a Tier 11 powerhouse appeared. They cannot use power greater than Tier 4, and their technology cannot go higher than Tier 6. Such a place is excellent for the savant race to base their kind and protect themselves from the greedy hands of all the other planes in the astral realm. So, what brings you here so far away? Asked Corey. His eyes seemed to contain all the truths of the universe. I need to know how to deal with the Time Guardians, said Edward directly. You've become a time criminal. Yes. Well, you could stay here. I doubt they could do anything to you. Edward shook his head. This solution was like running away to another plane. Do you know how the Time Guardians originated? I don't know. In the beginning of the universe, Krona created the Elder Gods, granting each of them certain authority at birth. Her purpose was to allow them to help her manage the universe as she stabilized the process of going from chaos to order. However, something unimaginable occurred. The Space Elder God created the first act of killing in the universe, eliminating the Time Elder God and taking its power. Corey paused, giving Edward time to process this information. Krona wanted to punish him, even kill him. However, the latter was a smart individual and a great talker. He convinced her that time needed to be preserved to prevent other lives from messing with the space-time continuum. He made an oath to guard the sanctity of the multiverse and all its timeline. At first, Krona accepted his plea because she saw his position as guardian as a form of prison. However, as time passes and the universe is full of life, time criminals begin to appear, thus showing Krona the need for the guardians. After that, the Space Elder became more and more powerful until he encountered the Magus race, who almost annihilated him. Is this why the Time Divine Spark was on Earth? From the time the Magus race dealt with the Time Guardian, thought Edward. As you can guess, he survived and waited until the Magus race disappeared. Now, he's currently the strongest being in this plane. How strong is he? Well, he's the only Tier 11 existence in this plane. Better yet, he's more powerful than ordinary Tier 11 since he has the authority to borrow Krona's power. Edward frowned as this news was the same as Krona told him, even more detailed. So, how do I escape my fate as a time criminal? You must survive the time game. 540 time game. Yes, nodded Corey. The Space Elder God is ambitious yet capable. He knew that anyone who successfully broke the laws of the space-time continuum was talented or lucky in some way. So, he devised a method to use their knowledge for his own. The Great Elder paused as he swirled the drink on his glass. It was probably wine, but the dark purple color was somewhat eerie. He created the time game to give these time criminals a way to escape imprisonment. Well, that's the official reason. To survive the game, any criminal only needs to defeat him by showing him an unknown or unique understanding of time. You should be able to understand the implications behind such a method. Edward nodded. This approach was similar to how he created the Empire to use other individuals to help him gather magical knowledge. I have to say, you're unlucky. To be precise, all time criminals in this day and age are unlucky, continued the Great Elder. In ancient times, it was much easier to survive the time game. But now, after billions of years of gathering the knowledge of time criminals, nothing can truly impress him anymore. Edward frowned as he realized the problem's core. The Time Guardian has lived too long and has access to the multiverse, allowing him to communicate with his variants. After so long, this man should have mastered all the secrets and knowledge about time authority, making it almost impossible to impress. Even knowledge from other planes might be useless to him. My first instinct is to use void energy and its spacetime characteristics. However, there is a high chance that the Time Guardian also had access to void energy. The reason he concluded such a thing was due to how he first encountered void energy, the tier in spacetime discovered in Rowena's timeline. After the Magus race departed this universe, Edward did not doubt some void energy entered this world. As someone who can navigate the multiverse and has lived for so long, he should have experienced that era and gotten his paws in void energy. In that case, we need to change strategy, thought Edward. He wants a unique understanding of time? I can think of a few: the Time Stone in Marvel, Doctor Who's TARDIS, the Speed Force from The Flash, and many others. Edward internally sneered. The time game is a perfect opportunity for me to get close to him. If I play my cards correctly, I can make him pay and use him for an experiment. Edward knew that as long as he could create a method to break the soul limit, he would reach tier 10 quickly. His only concern is achieving tier 11, which seems to be an even more difficult task. A perfect example of the difficulty is this Space Elder God. Such a brilliant man who has mastered time rules to the pinnacle has not achieved tier 11, showing it's not a simple feat, let alone Edward, who plans to become the perfect tier 11. So, are you confident? Asked Corey. Confident? No, but it's better than when I had no information to go from. It's good not to be overconfident. In the worst case scenario, you can run away to other planes or this layer of the quantum realm. Although it will not guarantee safety, you can prolong your life. What do you mean by that? Asked Edward. He's not a simple man. He has countless powerful clones scattered all over the astral realm. So, even if you ran away to another plane, he would track your soul imprint and kill you. Your best chance without the game is to defeat him in the quantum realm, using the rules to your advantage. But even that is not a guaranteed plan. Edward took a moment to digest the information. If he ran away to another plane, he would have to deal with countless tier 10 clones of the Time Guardian. No, he doesn't have to use such a stupid method. He only needs to reveal my identity, and these top planes will hunt me down, analyzed Edward. As for the quantum realm, it would be a battle of attrition and foundation. Battle in the first layer involves not strength but a faction's power due to the limitations and rules. For example, if Edward wanted to invade this place, sending people whose power maxed out at tier 4 was not the best idea. The best way to fight would be to use ships or magical artifacts. However, the savant race has been in this place for who knows how long, so the Empire could not compete with their arsenal of weapons. So, if he wanted to conquer this place, he would have to spend years manufacturing tier 6 ships and sending them to attack his opponent, hoping to wipe them out slowly. In other words, the situation would be the same for him if he chose to hide in the quantum realm. However, the Space Elder God is probably even more ancient than the savant race, so Edward could not fathom the resources available to him. In other words, if I don't want to move the entire empire to another universe, I must win that time game, summarized Edward. Thank you for your information. My pleasure. If you don't mind, I have some doubts, continued Edward. Ask away. Why do I feel you don't want to mention his name out loud? Quite observant, nodded the Great Elder. Some things are taboo, and his name is one of them. So, he will know once it is uttered. Yes, especially for time criminals like you. Can it be written? Yes, said Corey before writing something in the air. Cosmos. Edward took a moment to remember that name. Second question, why did you reveal this information so easily? You did not ask anything in return and easily offered this piece of information. Something tells me it's not because I solved your previous puzzle. You're correct in your observation, said Corey. We are showing you kindness because you're also a member of the Akashic record. Edward frowned before relaxing. He guessed the savant tried to research him on the record, but like him, they could not get any information since he was also a member. Is this truly the only reason? Corey did not immediately answer, sipping from his glass. Have you heard of the concept of luck and destiny from the heavenly Deo plane? I know a little. Edward lied as he had only learned very little about that plane. However, he guessed the concept was similar to chi luck, which he had learned from reading novels in his past life. We have done research on this concept, so we can see many things. For example, you are a man blessed with great fortune or luck. As Corey said this, his eyes could see a golden dragon above Edward's eyes with spots of purple. We can tell you're a man destined for great things, especially after seeing Krona's blessing. Our race suffered tremendously at the hands of the Magus race, and we do not want the same thing to happen again. So, after seeing your destiny, we made the unilateral decision to make friends, even invest in your future. Maybe we can achieve our dreams after associating with you. 541 exchange. Don't worry, I will show you that your choice was wise, said Edward with a smile. He pointed to the side, and a magical circle appeared. The Great Elder looked with interest as he had never seen such a magic system. If the Great Elder would do me the honor. Corey briefly looked at the magic circle before saying, why not? Without hesitation, he walked inside. Soon, the three found themselves in another space. Welcome to the Grand Arcane Library, said Edward with a proud smile. Corey looked around, not hiding the shock on his massive head. What a great library. Although the size is only 5% of ours, that's still impressive. The savant race possessed the most extensive library in the entire astral realm, meaning the knowledge they contained was greater than countless planes combined. So, anyone with a library greater than 1% of their size should be praised for their accomplishment. I know my library cannot compare to yours in size, but I guarantee you cannot compare to me in quality. Bold words, Sir Edward, said Corey, not hiding the contempt on his face. Haha, I know you won't believe me simply because of my words, continued Edward. So, let me show you the proof. He waved his hand, and a holographic screen appeared before Corey. The latter immediately knew how to use it and began to browse the catalog of this library. At first, he was nonchalant, but with each passing second, his brows became furrowed. Impossible, there is no way your library contained these secrets and knowledge. He was truly angry, believing this person had misled him with this fake library, probably in a shoddy method to impress their clan. This was not the first time their clan had experienced such a thing. I know you won't easily believe, said Edward calmly, not minding the latter's outburst. I will grant you the authority to read some of these documents. Corey frowned after hearing this. He controlled his urge to storm out of this place. Without hesitation, he picked a book called Advanced Understanding of the Relationship Between the Body, Soul, and Mana. Their savant race's most advanced knowledge on this topic originated from studies done in the heavenly Deo plane. In that plane, the casters call themselves immortal cultivators. Their power system involved the concept of unity between essence, spirit, and chi, another term for the body, soul, and energy. Corey began reading this book and soon realized the first few pages reached the same level as their race's research. Furthermore, after more than 20 pages, the knowledge in this book was beyond them. However, something happened that made him want to kill someone. Where is the rest? He asked, looking at Edward as if he was his enemy. Like I said, partial access, replied Edward with a smile. You. Corey's massive head moved sideways like he was about to fall from the air. He controlled himself before choosing another topic of interest and reading the information. As expected, the knowledge was true and very advanced. However, it stopped midway. Corey tried a few times but eventually chose to stop. He felt like he was about to have a brain aneurysm. What do you want for your library? He asked directly. Law of equivalent exchange, said Edward. My arcane empire will exchange knowledge with knowledge, quality for quality, quantity for quantity. And if the quality is not on par, quantity can be used to make up for it. Corey was quiet as he understood the latter's plan. He wanted to use this method to absorb most of the knowledge in their library. The worst thing is that their savant race could not resist this open plot. Corey finally sighed. How do you want to exchange? Can you make the decision for your entire race? Yes. As the great elder of the council, he has the final say in such a situation. In that case, everything is fine. I will send an ambassador to your city. They will be responsible for negotiating the exchange between us. Corey frowned after hearing this. He could foresee how excruciating such an exchange would be, with each side arguing over the value of every piece of knowledge. If it were up to him, he would have preferred a faster mode of exchange, but he knew this was not possible. Maybe we could use the Akashic record to facilitate a faster exchange. The Akashic record has ways to quantify knowledge, so using them as an intermediary might accelerate the process. What about using the Akashic record to accelerate the process? Suggested Corey. No, said Edward directly. Why not? Such an act will reveal all our knowledge to them. So, how can we exchange in the future? That's true. Although the savant race exchanged knowledge with the Akashic record, they also controlled themselves since they knew little about this mysterious and unknown force. When is the ambassador coming? As soon as I return home, replied Edward, and the great elder nodded. He took one last look at this library before unwillingly leaving. Edward and Luna did not spend too much time afterward, directly returning to the floating city. I haven't seen so happy and relaxed in a while, said Luna. Now that I know how to deal with my situation, I do feel a lot better, nodded Edward. That's good, she replied. So, what machination do you have against the savant race? What do you mean by that? That face you made when you rejected their proposal to use the Akashic records, that's the face you make when scheming something. Edward laughed in embarrassment. Based on the conversation, I deduce their authority in the record is not as high as mine, so I will take this opportunity. So, you're getting them involved. Only partially. I will use my authority to buy an artifact that can quantify the value of knowledge. I will give it to the ambassador and have them negotiate a higher price. Their desire for our knowledge is greater than ours for theirs, so it's possible to take advantage of this situation, nodded Luna. However, as you said, aren't you afraid of them stealing our information? With Merlin as my backer, they wouldn't dare, replied Edward, who suddenly frowned. Speaking of the old man, I haven't heard from him for a while. I'm worried that something has happened to him. Luna embraced him. Don't worry. Lord Merlin will be fine. I hope. Edward and Luna knew the significance of someone of Merlin's level dying. Such an event would shake the entire omniverse, and it would also be an indication of how dire the situation was. The two soon returned to the floating city without any problems. Edward returned to the surface world without hesitation. As soon as he returned, he contacted his family and told him he had succeeded in his endeavor and should stop worrying about him. The family then scheduled a dinner for a few days later. Afterward, Edward continued his work. He needed to create a massive team dedicated to studying and developing the quantum realm. The team did not only involve the ambassador but also arcanists with different research directions, including divination. Luna was very interested in using the quantum realm as a medium for divination. Meanwhile, Edward wanted to study that place's rules and know what to expect in the deeper layers. The process took over a month, and Edward witnessed the team leaving. He had one last talk to the ambassador as he handed the Akashic Records artifact. Finally, he began to prepare for the time game and the Empire's future. 542-100-year anniversary. Edward held a document containing all the savant race's knowledge about previous time games. He had to pay a hefty price for this document, to the point he no longer felt bad for what his ambassador was about to say to him. He exhaled once he finished. It's really just a game for him to learn more. His eyes twinkled as he summarized many things about the elder god named Cosmos. For example, in recent games, the latter was more ruthless in his approach while also more laissez-faire. His knowledge has reached the point where he cares little about the game, treating them as an afterthought. Simultaneously, he also has no patience for the criminals, immediately executing them if they cannot get his interest. Edward created a basic character model for Cosmos for when he meets the latter. With more information, the chances of succeeding in his confrontation will drastically increase. Morgana, send the information to the think tank to see if they can deduce more information. All right. Do you want to tell them of your situation? Edward's status as a time criminal was of the highest level, so the number of people who knew could be counted on 2 hands. Tell them. These people should be able to deduce something if I try to be sneaky. The Empire's think tank was composed of the brightest strategic minds, so Edward never underestimated these people's abilities. As you wish. Edward did not waste time as he accessed the Akashic Records. His objective was to see if he could find more information about Cosmos from the records. As expected, he muttered, he was also a local branch member, just the savant and the Magus race. At least we now know for sure that no knowledge about time magic in this universe would be of help in the time game, said Morgana. True, nodded Edward, the more knowledge they had about the opponent, the greater his chances were. So, what's the plan? Do you want to start a voyage immediately? No, we have plenty of time, said Edward calmly. Furthermore, I want to reach tier 10 before the start of the time game. In that case, you should start dealing with the issue of the soul limit. That should be my main concern next, nodded Edward before starting his work. For the next 20 years, he focused on 3 things: soul limit, mastering the Magus race's inheritance, primordial runes, and ruling the Empire. Master, it's time. Already? Yes, nodded Morgana, and Edward closed the enchantment before him. How long did I spend this time? Close to 500 years, replied Morgana. So, I'm already 1,500 years old? Time truly has no meaning to an immortal, sighed Edward. That's how long-lived species experience time. Edward stretched out his body. It's unfortunate I could not come to a solution that I liked. The others are fine too, reassured Morgana. But not good enough. He looked at a cube on his table and closed his eyes. Countless memories rushed into his mind, and he digested them in an instant. A few minutes later, he opened his eyes as he exhaled deeply. 500 years, and I just finished mastering the first floor. You wouldn't have this problem if you didn't insist on learning everything, complained Morgana. The first floor is the foundation of primordial runes, so it's best to learn everything. From the second floor, I can consider whether to specialize. Whatever, anyway, you're the boss. Let's go, said Edward, leaving his lab after a long time. He has not left the room during the past 500 years, 20 years outside. His family came to see him, and he would send clones to deal with the Empire's affairs. He would have never left if not for the importance of today's date and the upcoming voyage. Out of the room, he saw Olivier waiting for him. Only you? You have a problem with that? No, I didn't mean that. It's just I haven't seen you guys in a while. Did you forget? They already left. Oh, right. In the past 20 years, the Empire recuperated from the war while also focusing on ruling its territory. Its territory had increased to an entire galaxy, but the population was not nearly enough for such a vast territory. So, the government had to focus on encouraging birth while also migrating certain races to other systems. The goal was to populate the entire galaxy to a certain level. After 20 years, they have barely reached their goal. During this period of rapid expansion and development, a few more floating cities were built, and more than 2 years ago, everyone basically left on their own to another universe, leaving Olivier on her own. Even Bellatrix left on her own. Are you going to stay or leave as well? I'll leave, she replied. After the last war, I felt my ability as a commander was subpar. So, I will travel to other worlds and learn more about intergalactic battles. If even your ability is subpar, wouldn't the other commanders die in shame? Said Edward with a smile. They should, said Olivier with her general military look. One of my objectives for this trip is to create a better training method for our empire. Our current military academy is not on par for our upcoming war with the gods or other planes. In that case, do you want me to delay opening our borders? No, replied Olivier. If you don't do it, the issue of resources will soon become more apparent. That's true. In the past 20 years, the empire's population has skyrocketed, reaching an unimaginable level. With the Konosuba dimension, every citizen of the Empire is an arcanist and can reach Tier 3 at a bare minimum. However, how could the resources of one galaxy be enough for such a large population of magic users, and with the Empire's rapid growth? Edward did not dare send people to other galaxies even though he was confident he would bypass the gods' blockage outside the Milky Way. Luckily, he had access to the dark multiverse to help the situation, but it was not enough. So, the next step of development is to open the Empire to the astral realm. However, such an act also has its downside with how much other planes are hostile to the cosmic faith plane. Have you prepared your speech? Asked Olivier. I have. Don't waste time, you'll be on in less than 2 hours. Edward went to change his dress to a more elegant, regal, and excessive robe. Today was the Empire's 100-year celebration, and he had a lot of things to do. After dressing up, a shadow manifested behind Edward. What is it? There is a situation that needs to be reported, said Itaki. Oh, one of the competitors reached Tier 9. Interesting. How did this happen? Asked Edward. Over the years, although he did not find the perfect solution to break the soul limit, he did create countless other lesser methods. However, under his control, the power ceiling of the Empire did not surpass Tier 8, the same as him. We believe something outside has interfered, reported Itake. Someone broke our defense? That would explain why you're reporting to me instead of Grindelwald. Have you found the source of the breach? Yes, and it has been dealt with. How much information did we lose? It hasn't been detected yet, but it should not be too much. Edward did not say anything as he looked at the sky. Since the end of the war, these outside gods have not stopped trying to infiltrate the Milky Way galaxy. Take him into custody and find out why he betrayed us. Yes. Itake disappeared from the room as if he was never here. Meanwhile, Edward waited until it was time for his nationally publicized speech. His wives' clones followed him to the podium. After all, it would be weird for the Empire's queens to not show up for such an occasion. 543-100-year anniversary. 2. Edward stood before a large stadium full of more than 1 million people. At every corner of this stadium were numerous enchantments in charge of broadcasting today's event to every corner of the Empire's territory. The people attending the ceremony included the most powerful and accomplished arcanists, scientists, engineers, wealthy individuals, and politicians. There was no podium before Edward as he only held a cane with his family member behind him. Without being nervous, he began to talk. More than 100 years ago, wizards removed the status of secrecy, beginning the journey of integration with the non-magical. Afterward, we faced our greatest challenge, the invasion of the Dementors. During that time of great duress and confrontation, the magical and non-magical united for a common cause. In that time of war, we learned of the grandeur and cruelty of the universe. We grew and developed, banding together for our mother planet and the advancement of magic. Edward paused to create tension. The Arcane Empire has existed for only 100 years. In that short period, we have set foot in every corner of the galaxy, pushed the limit of science and technology, explored the mysteries of the soul, played with space and time, conquered death, and even dabbled in the power of fate and creation. In 100 years, we have created a civilization that the lesser mind would label as divine. Edward once again paused, allowing all the viewers to truly fathom how much they've accomplished in such a short period. This moment is not just his celebration but the celebration of all the Empire's citizens. This anniversary is a time for everybody to be proud of being a member of the Empire. Our journey was not easy, continued Edward. We have lost many comrades and suffered numerous setbacks and catastrophes. However, none could stop us. On the contrary, we have forged or tempered our collective will for progress, development, and the pursuit of knowledge and truth with every adversity. Edward's body exuded an unparalleled confidence and might. Our journey has just begun. The universe is vast, full of unknown mysteries, secrets, and knowledge. Our footsteps have only graced a small portion of it, not even 1%. My fellow citizens, now is not the time to be complacent or satisfied with what we have. Our destiny is to one day write the history of this universe, to one day create the one and only eternal civilization. May the arcane truth guide and protect us. The stadium's attendees stood up and said in unison, May the arcane truth guide and protect us. The majority of citizens scattered across the Milky Way galaxy stood up and said the exact phrase, May the arcane truth guide and protect us. After the speech, the ceremony continued with a parade of the royal family visiting many places throughout the Empire's territory. One of the first destinations was the shrine for what Guznad did during the war. Once that finished, there was a prepared show by the Empire's most popular and talented artists, including the legendary star, Kapoor. Her voice was the definition of soulful, as she perfectly used her understanding of sound and soul magic in her performance. After this event, everyone tuned in for the finale, the Emperor selection. According to the Empire's rules, a new empire would be selected every 100 years, but only if the former one was defeated. Otherwise, the position is lifelong. The selection process was divided into 3 sections: knowledge, alchemy, and artificer, and battle. The Empire's ruler must be a master of all trades and display a high attainment in all these fields. Edward placed these rules into laws because he knew how hard it was for one person to master so many magical fields. Without great talent and sufficient time, it's impossible for 99% of arcanists. In the first round, Edward looked at his main competitors, focusing on someone in particular. Orochimaru, I did not expect to see you here. What can I say? If I want to achieve my goals, your position is the best and most direct way, replied the snake-tongue man. In a short period, he has become a Tier 8 arcanist. Sadly, his dream of mastering all knowledge seems to become more distant to him with each passing day. The Empire had too much knowledge created daily, and he could not pay the arcane merit needed to buy even 5% of them. However, if he could become emperor, he would immediately gain access to more than 80% of it. True, so let's begin, nodded Edward as he received challenges from many talented arcanists, many of whom were individuals he brought from other universes. The entire process was similar to the Bones Council election, with Edward showing up his knowledge and ability. The entire experience was a feast for the Empire as they saw the Emperor and some of the best minds arguing and debating. Of course, the result was not unexpected. Edward was accomplished in most fields. Although many of these arcanists' accomplishments in certain fields were much greater than his, except for space-time, curse, elements, curse, and soul magic, they were not all-encompassing like him. So, in the end, he was still the winner. The situation was the same in the next section. Many potion masters outclassed him. However, most of these people only studied potions and not artificer. However, in the field of magic artifact creations, no one dared say they were better than Edward. After all, the floating cities were the proof they needed to know how much they were outclassed. The third and final part of this election was the truly exciting aspect. The citizens witnessed their emperor battling some of the most gifted individuals in the empire. Edward had to fight people like Naruto, who still wanted to become Hokage, which, in this case, was his position. Naruto and Sasuke seemed to be connected by fate, so they formed a team for the battle. It was the same for Asta and Yuno from the Black Clover world. Edward agreed to fight them together and still won. Even Kazuma and his previous team of rogues participated in this battle. In the end, Edward was the final winner, but not without pushing himself to the limit. In some of his most powerful battles, he faced talented individuals from the Empire. Amongst the people from other universes who gave him the most trouble, it would be, without a doubt, Mirioliana. That woman had an iron will and refused to stop, no matter how severe her injuries were. Furthermore, she was like a goddess of war. The longer she fought, the more injuries she received, and the more powerful she became. Once the event ended, Edward was re-elected for another 100-year term. Many people realized it might be impossible to sit on the throne this normal way. But most of these people enjoyed a challenge, so they would not give up so easily. Furthermore, the election was a time for people to achieve fame, glory, and wealth. So, it would be fine if it became more of an event in the future instead of an actual election. Lastly, the throne was not hereditary. If the emperor's future descendants wanted to sit in that position, they had to show to the world they were as scary as their father. People did not believe a second emperor would appear in the world. After the event, Edward still had a few things to deal with before beginning his long voyage, the first of which was to meet with Itake regarding the anomaly that appeared before the ceremony. 544 government affairs. The entire election lasted more than a month, so Edward was relieved when the ordeal ended. He wanted to celebrate with his family, but even his mother and father had left, traveling to another universe for a vacation despite how much he protested against it. Ultimately, he had to accept his family had a life of their own, and he could not control them. So, he turned into an obsessive protective freak and created countless measures for his mother and father in case something happened to them. He walked into a room where his aunt waited for him. That was a great speech and a great display of might, said Amelia with a smile. With this election, the royal family's power will reach a new height, not to mention their popularity in the eyes of the people. You think so too, replied Edward before sitting opposite her, serving a drink for him and her. How are things? He asked. Generally speaking, everything is proceeding smoothly, replied Amelia as she showed him a bunch of data regarding the current state of the empire. There should be a but, right? Yes, she nodded. 2 proposals have repeatedly appeared in the council despite how many times I voted against them. The first one is the merit crime bill, which would allow the use of arcane merit to offset their crimes. That's understandable. Now that these people have godlike powers, they also want to be above the law, replied Edward with a sneer. Do you want me to send the ghost squad to pay them a visit? Not necessary, chuckled Amelia. We already have a plan to deal with them. Edward looked at the data and nodded. The plan was a galaxy-wide media smear campaign against the people who supported the deal or the powerful arcanists trying to lobby it to pass in the council. The Empire will reveal their identities to the public, ruining their reputation and dragging them into the mud. That's an excellent solution. What's the other bill? Some people are advocating to make selling slaves legal, replied Amelia with a frown. Mostly clones and undead, but the list also includes other races and species. Clean these people up, said Edward directly. We are about to open access to the astral realm. If we do not regulate such a thing, the underground slave-selling business will boom once these people can control entire planes. That's my plan, and I only wanted you to sign on it. Edward nodded and signed his order. The last thing is we need to clean up planet Dark Star. Already, the Empire was not a utopia, and despite all its advancements in ending world war, world hunger, and curing all regular diseases, the human heart is unfathomable. As such, things like crime and evil nature still exist and can be said to be rampant because of how powerful arcanists are. So, the members of the think tank had the brilliant idea of controlling crime since it could not be completely stopped. The Empire then secretly created the Dark Market, a place that gathered all the evil arcanists, the people who sell slaves, drugs, banned substances, mercenaries, assassins, rogues, outlaws, or anyone who doesn't like to follow strict rules and laws. No one knows that the underground, which is the darkest place of the Empire, was established by the government to control crime. Once in a while, the government will discover the underground and clean up the place. However, a few months later, a new one will be opened and repeat the situation. In the past 20 years, Planet Dark Star has been cleaned up and reopened 3 times. Go ahead. If you need to mobilize the Royal Guard, you can do so. There is no need for that, replied Amelia. If the Navy could not deal with one planet full of outlaws, then they would be useless and need to be replaced. The two continued their official talk for a while before stopping and changing the topic. I wonder how Susan is doing, said Amelia. Although the little girl had parents, she always treated her like her child. The world of Yu-Gi-Oh is not inherently dangerous. So, as long as nothing happens to her in the void, she will be fine. If something had happened to her, they would have long sensed something. So, Susan should have already reached her destination and studied these creatures for the creation and completion of card summoning magic. What about you? Any interest in visiting other worlds? The world has plenty of mystery for me to unravel, so there is no need for now, she replied with a smile. Plus, someone has to remain to keep things in check. It's fine if you feel this way. However, don't let power control you. You know me better than this. She is now one of the people with the most power in the Empire. However, despite this fact, she kept up with her magical studies to ensure she is as powerful as possible while also keeping a sense of wonder and desire for pursuing knowledge. She keeps her position because the Empire is her baby, watching it grow from the ground up. Edward and most of the royal family are not too keen on governing, so someone needs to keep an eye on things to prevent any issues. That's good, nodded Edward as he led his aunt away. Soon afterward, Itaki appeared in the room. What's the result? The gods have summoned a divine armament to the material plane from the outer realm. They pierced a hole through our defense with its power and contacted an arcanist called Chu. Edward had a screen before him showing him a new race with crystal eyes. He exchanged information for a divine blessing, allowing him to rise very quickly from Tier 5 to Tier 9. According to our analysis, their plan was probably to have him take the throne and cause chaos. How much information was revealed? Asked Edward with a frown. We were lucky Chu did not reveal everything, trying to bargain for more benefit, replied Itaki. Edward felt relieved when he saw that news about the floating city and a few other important things had not been revealed. Are you sure he was the only one they contacted? Chu does not know about this, so we are still investigating. Use as many people as you need to find things out. I will. How is the expansion going? Everything is proceeding smoothly, but we still need more time to create a universe-wide spy network. Any concrete plan? My objective is to control an already existing order. Unfortunately, the best spy faction of this plane is directly connected to some powerful Tier 10 gods, so we cannot control their souls or use any other forms of control. Believers are scary to deal with because they have no fear of death. Even if you threaten them with their loved ones, they will not hesitate to kill themselves, so they ascend to their god's divine kingdom and achieve eternal peace. Take your time. Once we have cracked the secrets of the soul flame, we might be able to deal with the control these gods have on their believers' souls, reassured Edward. My lord, may I ask how much progress has been made? I have made great progress in the past 20 years. However, it's far from enough. That's unfortunate, said Itaka before taking his leave. Morgana, continued Edward. If the gods used a divine armament to pierce through the fog, shouldn't a department detect such a change? Yes. The energy used to power the fog should have increased drastically and alerted us. Edward created 3 Tier 10 supersolid ether cores to power the fog that is protecting the Milky Way galaxy. He also established departments to keep watch at all times, so it was abnormal that he did not detect this breach in advance. Find what happened. Give me a moment. A few minutes later, the spike in energy was detected, but someone did not do their job properly and reported the problem too late. Edward groaned. Fire them, whoever it is. As you wish, replied the little elf. None of this would have happened if you used state-of-the-art artificial intelligence for that department's system. For security reasons, man-made workers are better in this situation, replied Edward. Despite the current situation, the data has shown that using responsible individuals for security measures was more secure than AI. What is my next itinerary? He asked, changing the subject. Chris has made some progress in his research. You can go see him. All right. 545 will tempering method. Edward soon arrived at Chris's lab, which had been waiting for him since he sent prior notification of his arrival. Chris, how are things? Very well, Your Majesty. It seems married life suits you well. How about? Consider having more than one wife, joked Edward. I don't want to turn into a mental patient that has gone crazy, swiftly replied Chris. Who was his wife? The chief of the National Bureau of Mental Health, one of the best Tier 8 spiritual arcanists in the world, Shennis King. If he dared step out of line, he was sure the government would soon find him with a shattered psychic with no proof that his wife was involved. Haha, it's good she's keeping you in check and not letting the fame and glory get to your head, nodded Edward, who also knew how scary a spiritual arcanist like Shennis King was. True to that. Although he was a man of exceptional will, it did not mean he could not change and be corrupt by power, wealth, and fame. Enough of the chit-chat, and let's get to business. As we should, nodded Chris as he led Edward to his office. Without wasting time, he began to show his research results. As you already knew, my research direction was to create a perfect method that would allow Arcanists to temper their willpower. My first attempt was the normal stuff, using illusions to create a vivid world that would torment the Arcanists and temper their will. Sadly, this method had a variety of results and many side effects, including permanent damage to my subjects. Some people responded to experiencing hardship, while others completely shut down. Chris showed the data while explaining. My second attempt was to use battles to temper the will. I tried this method after learning about the Haki system, but the results also varied. Some people responded positively, but most failed to achieve anything. My third attempt was a simple meditation method. By analyzing the correlation between willpower and the soul, spirit, mind, and memories, I created a meditation technique to nurture a person's willpower slowly. Sadly, this method was too slow. It could take thousands of years to increase the willpower by a factor of 1, and the higher the number, the longer the time required. Screen after screen flashed before Edward as he swiftly analyzed these experimental data from the early stages to their conclusion. After all these failures, I returned to the board and summarized what I have learned. I wanted to know the source of willpower. What made someone so determined was that they were willing to suffer unimaginable pain to accomplish them. They were willing to discipline themselves to a level that most people could not fathom. And the answer I got was the consciousness. To be specific, subconsciousness, the part most people do not know, is responsible for most of their beings or even existence. After finding a direction, everything else came naturally. I created a meditation technique that allowed any race or species to delve into their subconscious, find introspection, and control it. The result was not a simple improvement of willpower but a deeper understanding of the mind, the self, and the soul. Edward squinted his eyes as he saw a new paper Chris had just finished. It was titled, "The Link Between the Subconscious and the Soul Flame." He read it briefly before his eyes lit up. He immediately placed it on the top of his reading list before focusing on the other research results. After finishing reading through everything, Edward felt Chris' research reminded of something. After checking his memory, he realized the latter's research on the subconscious reminded him of the Immortal Cultivator's novel he used to read in Primordial Earth. One of the core concepts of those words was the idea of the Deo heart, the desire to pursue the Deo or path. A cultivator with a strong Deo heart was someone of immense will who was willing to do anything and experience any hardship to ensure he reached the top of the world. Everything is connected, and all paths lead to the same destination, thought Edward of this famous quote in these novels. He secretly sighed at how true these words were. He finally focused back on Chris and asked, "With your method, how much willpower can be increased?" "Sadly, it only reaches level 5. I've reached level 6 myself, but I'm an anomaly." Edward gave him a look. If nothing unexpected occurs, Chris might be the second person in the Empire to control authority and become a legendary Arcanist. Level 5 is the minimum standard in most worlds to become a legendary Arcanist. However, it's still not enough for this world, analyzed Edward. "Do you have any ideas for future development?" "Yes, the collective consciousness," replied Chris. "The planet's will." "Yes, my idea is that Arcanists must confront the planet's will, which is a gathering of the consciousness of everybody, with their own. In the process, they have to protect their consciousness and not be assimilated. According to my idea, the planet will is not enough. Having a galaxy will and even a universe will would be better. However, if it does not exist, maybe we can artificially create one." Edward gave him an odd look, and Chris picked up on it. "I was right. There is a galaxy and a universe will. Universe will, and the ultimate purpose of increasing willpower is to overwhelm it and force it to hand over control over the fundamental rules of the universe." Chris looked at him in shock. "Is that even possible?" "Yes, I've done, and the requirements are a minimum 8 on the willpower scale." "I see. If we, Arcanists, want to be on the same level as the gods, we must control authority. However, the path of faith is not for us, so we need an alternative method." "That's correct." Chris sighed. "I salute, Your Majesty, for your forward thinking." He could not imagine how long this man had been planning the rise of the path of arcane and how willing he was to share such power with so many people. Such a mind deserves his respect. Edward accepted the salute and continued, "I'm unaware of any galaxy will, but we can artificially manufacture one. Your will tempering method could first involve a planetary will, then a star system will, and a galaxy will before the final confrontation with the universe will. However, you should create safety measures to ensure the sanity of our people when using this method." Confronting a planet will was not a simple endeavor despite the fact that a Tier 6 Arcanist can easily destroy a planet. The planet will contains the thoughts and memories of billions of people, if not more. If an Arcanist was not careful, their soul could be corrupted after coming into contact with so many people murmuring together. It's possible for them to suffer a state similar to the gods' faith poisoning, where they suffer personality splits like a schizophrenic patient, or their main personality is forcefully changed into something else. "I will," nodded Chris, who knew the Empire's motto of pushing the boundary while maintaining a paranoid level of cautiousness in case something happened. "If you need anything, you know who to contact." Chris knew he had a lot of work to do, so he did not waste time. He must first access most of the Empire on the planet will research before proceeding on the next step to recreate it on a galaxy size. While this part of the project is going on, He must create a perfect method to temper willpower using the planet will. Lots of work to do, he muttered with a smile. He called his wife to tell her he would be late today but promised to return home. Then, he continued his work. 35,546 soul limit methods so close, muttered Edward after finishing reading Chris' paper on the link between the soul flame and the human's subconscious. Over the years, he has developed a few methods to deal with the soul flame limit. For example, divine energy. He created an enchantment that converted mana into divine energy. However, this method was flawed, requiring a medium, primarily divine blood. Although he only needs a few milliliters as the medium, he had Guznad's body as an experiment along with what remained of Herpo. However, Edward did not like this method since it relied too much on divinity or even foreign aid. The second method he created was to overwhelm the soul with too much soul energy. As long as a soul absorbs enough soul energy, an arcanist can break the limit and reach a higher tier. Unfortunately, this method also had a few flaws, the first of which was the low success rate. An arcanist needs absolute control over his soul to succeed in this endeavor, and their soul also needs a certain level of innate toughness. The control needed for this method was too high, rendering large-scale usability impossible. As for the innate toughness, many people have special soul talents, and Edward created a potion to help in the endeavor. Regardless, he eliminated this method. The other method used was a rare material discovered after the war called Soul Essence Orb. The thing allowed any race or species to break the limitations of their souls. Sadly, this resource was scarce and not enough for the entire empire. Edward and the empire tried to artificially create it and 3D print it, but they failed. The fourth method he found was the result of his student Chloe's research. She found a special energy in the dream plane that could help with the limit. Unfortunately, the final result was the same. This energy was rare and could not be excavated in large numbers. Edward tried energy conversion to convert mana and other forms of energy into dream nether energy, and the result was unsatisfactory. The soul limit of 99% of humans was tier 6. However, to create the dream nether energy required for a single arcanist to break the limit and reach tier 7, Edward had to convert the equivalent of an entire galaxy, tier 9, worth of mana. The Empire was already dealing with an energy shortage, relying mostly on the dark multiverse for their needs. So, it was not cost-effective to use dream nether energy to allow people to reach tier 7, let alone higher levels. Edward's fifth attempt at solving this problem involved the multiverse. He conducted a dark experiment where an alchemist fused his soul with his counterparts in the multiverse. This experiment was fascinating to him. At first, there were complications with test subjects as they became crazy. However, after figuring out that the memories and experiences of the variants were different, he changed the experiment. The souls of the variants will be purified, removing their memories, will, and consciousness before fusing with the prime variant. At first, this experiment showed positive signs that he would succeed. Unfortunately, the soul flame will turn dark purple at the last moment, giving out a feeling of corruption. To this day, he does not know the cause of this change, but he also understands this might be the main issue he will face after trying to reach tier 11. Edward's sixth experiment was on forcing the soul to become divine. He was not referring to godhood or faith but more to ascending or evolution of the soul to a higher state. In the Xiangxia novels he read, the nascent soul would turn into the divine soul before eventually turning into the immortal soul. Mana can evolve and turn into ether. With this idea as a foundation, he tried to do the same for his soul, which would, in turn, affect the soul flame. Sadly, his method failed. He could not purify the soul like he did with mana, so his ascension method failed. He tried to nourish a soul with the power of specific rules or authority. There were some changes, but nothing he could detect or observe. According to the conclusion he came up with, the rules did not belong to him, so he could not properly use them to elevate his soul to a higher state. Ultimately, he had to stop Project Soul Divinity to return to it later. Edward's seventh attempt was both successful and a failure. After observing Charles's soul flame and its unique time ring, he had an idea to create something similar, but not with time energy but with the power of knowledge. It's a commonly known fact that knowledge nourishes the soul and allows arcanists to reach a higher tier. So, he thought of a method to condense everybody's knowledge into a ring that served as burning fuel for the soul flame, allowing it to sublimate and break the limitations. The research in that direction was not easy, but luckily, Edward discovered the wisdom authority he once stole from Truth in the Full Metal Alchemist universe was very helpful. So, after countless trials and errors, he succeeded in creating the knowledge ring and even made a universal method that any alchemist could use after reaching tier 6. However, he was soon disappointed. The knowledge ring did nourish the soul flame and allowed it to evolve to a higher level. In other words, it did break the soul limitation. Unfortunately, the process was excruciatingly slow. After this failure, Edward was not discouraged as he saw another path to success, the relationship between the soul and the flame. They are connected, but the flame is the main source of life. Edward tried to use the connection between them, forming a deep enough connection that would allow an arcanist to use soul energy from the soul to nourish the knowledge ring and accelerate the speed at which the soul flame evolves. Sadly, he always felt he was missing one last link for this project to succeed. Chris' research gave him another hint, but he still felt he was missing a few things. Morgana, what do you think? I have nothing to say, shrugged the little elf. She has been running millions of calculations every day with no success. Alright, send Chris research to the History Council to see if they can do something. What's next on my schedule? You have to oversee the process of opening our borders and quickly check the Bone Council. Then, we can depart on our journey. That's good. Edward did not immediately leave as he had one last thing to check, whether Chris's will tempering method would work for him. He entered a secluded room in his lab before entering a state of meditation. The process of controlling the subconscious was not a pleasant experience. Edward was forced to control the deepest part of himself, his deepest desires, the good, the bad, and the extremely evil and disgusting. He had to accept who he was as a person and decide whether to change, whether he could even change. His subconscious also revealed many things to him. For example, some mild experiences that do not seem important have formed his personality's core aspects. I definitely had some psychotic tendencies when I was in primordial Earth. And after coming to this world and acquiring power, they were magnified, he summarized as he opened his eyes and exhaled. How is it? Asked Morgana. It should allow my willpower to finally reach 9. That's good news. 547 planar expansion. After the intense events that was the election, the people thought they would enter a time of great peace, with nothing as grandiose as that event. They thought the most exciting news coming to the Empire was things like cleaning up planet Dark Star and getting rid of crime, or news about corruption and degradation in the Empire's council. However, more than a month later, another major news spread like wildfire: the discovery of the astral realm. The existence of other planes opened a new door to the Empire. They now had access to countless civilizations, including their history, knowledge, and resources. How they understood the universe and how it operates drastically changed, and many people felt they took one step closer, as a collective, in pursuing the arcane truth. In just a few days of this news, countless arcanists bought information regarding the astral realm and began writing papers. However, these people did not have much time when Edward came on TV and announced the Empire's next step of expansion. Arcanists as low as Tier 6 can buy or rent astral towers, traveling ships to explore the astral realm. Everyone knew that the Empire was entering its next step of major expansion and development, so the mood of the entire galaxy was extremely jovial, with countless people signing up. In a short period, the Empire returned to the age of exploration, the short time after Edward's first voyage, where they first expanded outside the solar system. In that period, the universe was a vast unknown full of mystery. Many arcanists signed up to travel the Milky Way as explorers. Many people knew that the age of exploration was dangerous, especially in the early stages. But they also knew it was the best opportunity to get rich, acquire more resources, and climb the social and political ladder. The discovery of universal planes was an even greater opportunity than back then. As such, countless people decided to buy an astral tower, even if they had to take a massive loan from the government or borrow one after signing a restrictive contract. Not everyone was qualified, despite how many people signed up and wished to acquire a tower. The guideline for traveling the astral realm was extremely strict, and these arcanists, who first complained, soon understood why. They learned that those powerful planes have an extreme hatred or desire for people in our cosmic faith plane because of what their predecessors, the Magus, did. As such, they must be extremely cautious in their voyage and not reveal their information. Luckily, these people had a great leader and a competent government. In the past 20 years, the Empire conquered a Tier 8 plane and secretly influenced or changed its history. The plane, which once contained mages but was ruled by a god, experienced a renaissance as one man renovated the mage path and created the arcane path. Under that man's leadership, the mages turned into arcanists and successfully rebelled against the gods. They took control of the plane and renamed it Arcane Plane from Glory Light Plane. The Arcane Plane became the place of origin for all arcanists in the Empire as Edward created a clean and new background for everybody to prevent their identity from leaking. Regardless, they also must be careful not to reveal the truth. This measure was also variable to the gods of their own universe, who also wished to disassemble the Empire into delicate parts. The second issue to consider for this new era was that their timeline was still isolated, making traveling to other planes a little more complicated. However, this problem was more of a logistic than anything else. The third problem to deal with was the proper behavior to contact civilization. The Empire acknowledges that war, invasion, and plundering are the theme of all civilization in the astral realm. However, they wish to attempt something different. For example, an arcanist can use the laws of equivalent exchange instead of direct invasion and plunder when dealing with weaker or less developed civilizations. The same approach is encouraged when dealing with more powerful civilizations up to Tier 8. Tier 8 civilization is the highest astral tower sold and the highest permitted civilization that an arcanist can interact with. There were also rules to follow, especially regarding the enslavement of the natives of any world. In the Empire, population equals more arcanists, which equals more strength. Slavery was outlawed, but there is also nuance to this issue. Some races, like abyss demons, are the manifestation of evil and everything chaotic. Such a race is impossible to domesticate or integrate into the Empire. The rules for dealing with such species are to exterminate them. Arcanists can enslave them, but there is a limit based on the person's tier and achievements. Edward and the Empire did not want these people to become one man's nation and destabilize the Empire's strength and power. The Empire does not restrict how arcanists interacted with other planes, they can choose peaceful or brutal means. However, there are benefits, like tax breaks, to following protocols and peaceful methods. Ultimately, these people were warned and had to sign a contract not to purposely create powerful enemies for the Empire. The final issue to deal with was tax. If an arcanist uses peaceful means to exchange with a plane, they only need to pay 25% of their income, which involves knowledge and resources. If they used brutal means, the tax was increased to 30%. Although 5% looked small, the number is astronomical when an entire plane is involved. Many people felt this tax was too huge. After all, they knew how much resources even a weak plane contained. However, the Empire explained to these people the tax was for multiple reasons. Firstly, if something happens to an arcanist during an exploration, they can contact the Empire to come to save them. The tax also covered the fee for reviving them in case they die or don't experience true death. An arcanist also had the right to ask the Empire to help them during a conquest or exchange. However, depending on how much help they ask, the tax paid will increase to a minimum of 50% and a maximum of 70%. The officer in charge of the seminar introducing the rules to these people told them the best job was to find plane coordinates and sell them to the Empire. Although Havika's mathematical model was wonderful, it was too far away from mapping the entire astral realm, and these coordinates would help. Furthermore, if an arcanist discovered Tier 9 or above planes, they cannot do anything about it except wait for the future when the restrictions are removed. So, it's the best choice to sell the information. The people attending the seminar felt relieved after hearing the information about taxes and their benefits, especially when they learned the Empire could save them from a Tier 10 threat if they gave sufficient reason. After all, their lives were more valuable than anything. The last section of the seminar was detailed knowledge about planes, how to identify their tier before entering, how to deal with planar will, courses on planar warfare and diplomacy, and recognizing people from the top planes and their relationships. Finally, everyone signed the necessary contracts before acquiring their astral tower and exploring the world. The Empire had taken another major step toward their dominance of this universe. 548. Fourth Great Voyage. Harry Potter, Dimensional Wizard by Lazy Sage. After the planar expansion ordeal, Edward had little to do before his voyage. He went to check on the research on the quantum realm while also visiting the savant race. The people both loved and hated him. The knowledge they acquired in the past few years made me sleep with a grin. Unfortunately, the tedious negotiation often ruined their happiness. Afterward, Edward checked on the Bones Council. Things were proceeding smoothly, with relatively no problem. His methods allowed his variants to work together while keeping their deepest secrets. Over the past years, the Empire has benefited immensely by using the Council's resources. Meanwhile, Edward had one problem he had to deal with, which was to prevent his variants from accessing other planes. He did not know whether there would be an issue with variants from the multiverse entering the astral plane. So far, the gods are all right. Regardless, he was unprepared to deal with this issue, at least not now. As such, his main issue with the Council was dealing with these variants that were close to mastering planar travel technology. Luckily, time was still short, relatively speaking, so there were not too many. Edward's biggest worry was the variants not part of the Council that had mastered this technology. After all, the multiverse was vast, full of endless variables and opportunities. Last thing to check, muttered Edward as he closed his eyes. A few minutes later, he opened them with a smile. Everything is proceeding smoothly. Not long ago, he finally received news from the spy he sent to infiltrate Deist Purple Robe's home world. Now, everyone is fine and was not detected, so the first step in the infiltration is completed. The next step is to create a believable identity and get Purple Robe's attention. Then, he can infiltrate the latter's Samsara Hall and take it down from the inside. I can't believe they've contacted us after so long, commented Morgana. The time difference between universes is fascinating. Indeed, it's something we should study one day. Anyway, all that matters is everything is going smoothly. Now, all I have to worry about is how fast he will take to completely control the artifact. Worrying about this won't help, so let's focus on the task at hand. Yes, so, are you ready? Asked Edward. Yes, I've prepared everything we need, including updating my database to contain all the Empire's progress in the last 20 years. In that case, let's not waste time. He first saw Olivier and had a passionate night before she left. She would travel to many worlds like him, but her purpose was to become a better commander. Afterward, Edward met with his aunt before entering Netheril and left. He promised Albion he would bring him on the next voyage, so he kept his promise. However, he still locked the dragon in his room and did not let him see anything to prevent problems. Is everything ready? Asked Edward. Yes, we have the coordinate. Then, let's go. Edward heard a sound before everything began to shake like it was an earthquake of 10 magnitude. Luckily, the process lasted only a few seconds before stopping. What happened? He asked, and Morgana did not immediately respond as she gazed at a small screen before her. We hit something in the midst of our travel. How can we be so unlucky? Or, is the void not what it used to be? I don't know, but luckily, everything is fine. We did not meet any creatures, nor were there any damages. That's good. Are we at our location? Yes. Then, let's go. The floating city entered this world while still in invisible mode. In an instant, Edward was outside a blue planet, Earth. Morgana immediately sent the sorcerer eyes to scan the planet, which appeared only to be an ordinary modern-day Earth. Unless you look at its history. Edward had a screen before showing the history of this planet. He read all the alien invasions this small planet experienced and the weird history of the past. It's hard to determine which one we are dealing with, said Morgana. The worst part is he's not here, and we do not know where in time he is. It will be a pain to track him down, unless you blatantly used your time rule. It's unwise to use such a method on a being of that caliber. Edward shook his head. How is the city adapting to the rules of this universe? Barely, replied Morgana. There is a powerful force that is rejecting all mana or magic. I have isolated its effect with the void shield and turned our system to a pure technology base. Will that be a problem? Our technology is not on par with our magic, so it can only function at 80% capacity. That's better than I anticipated. We have made great strides with the technomancer inheritance, knowledge from the council, and savant race and our efforts. Edward nodded. So, what's our next move? Asked Morgana. Let ourselves adapt first. Then, send a signal that only he would understand and come running. Don't stay on Earth. The floating city flew away to a faraway galaxy. A few days later, it sent a signal that scattered across the spacetime continuum and waited. Not even a week later, a blue police box appeared outside. Are you sure this is the place this time? Asked a female voice. Isn't it obvious? Asked a playful man's voice. Look outside. Is that a city floating in empty space? Why is it like that? What happened to it, and why is it sending a distress signal? That's why we are here, said the man, not hiding his excitement. Let's go. The blue box flew to the destroyed city, finding an open area to land. A few seconds later, two people walked out, a woman dressed in black and a young man wearing a bow tie. The two only walked a few steps before the surroundings trembled lightly. Then, the decrepit city reverted to a vibrant one full of life. What's going on? Asked the woman. I don't know, said the young man as he pointed to a metal stick, waving it around. I'll have this, said a sudden voice. Then, the metal rod in the young man's flew over to someone else, Edward. Sonic screwdriver, what an interesting piece of technology, he muttered before focusing on the two. Doctor, I've wanted to meet you for a long time. 32. 549 Conversation with the doctor. You know me, asked the 11th doctor. At this point, is there anyone who doesn't really know you? Asked Edward. Am I this renowned? I did not know this, he replied while fixing his bow tie with a slightly smug look on his face. Pay attention, we are in the enemy's territory, said the woman. I told you this might be a trap, but you didn't listen. If we didn't come, how would we know whether it was a trap or someone needing help? He has a point, interjected Edward. You're the one who lured us here and captured us. Your opinion is not valid. You must be the legendary Clara Oswald. You know me? And what do you mean by legendary? You are more famous or important than you realize, said Edward as he approached them. The doctor stood before Clara, but Edward did not care as he examined him like a rare specimen. What an interesting species. Are you one of those madmen who collects rare species? Asked the doctor, and Edward paused. Technically, I am, but that's why I'm here. Then, why are you here? You will know in a second, replied Edward, who handed him an object. Now, please put your finger in here. I need a sample of your blood. The doctor looked at him without moving. Look, although you are captured, there are no restraints or use of armed forces. Since we can have a civilized conversation, why not do it? After a brief hesitation, the doctor put his finger in the device and felt a prick in his finger. Edward smiled as he looked at the data on the screen before him. What an interesting species. Time energy is intrinsically linked to your very DNA, to your very soul. Now, can you tell me why you lure me here? Edward did not immediately answer but walked to the TARDIS. A device began to scan the blue box, and he looked at it with fascination. Are you here for my TARDIS? Yes and no, finally replied Edward. To be precise, my main objective is Clara, the impossible girl. Me? Why do you need me? I'm just an ordinary person, just ordinary Clara. Oh, you are far from ordinary, replied Edward. Sometimes later in your journey, events will unfold where time winds will scatter you into millions echoes or splinters across the doctor's timeline. Scattered? Does that mean I'm dead? So, that's it, muttered the doctor. That's why I keep meeting different versions of her at different periods of time. He remembered Clara Oswin Oswald, the barmaid and governess he met in 19th century London. He was saddened by her death but soon found another Clara in the 21st century. However, she had no memories of the past and seemed to be a completely different person. Now, he finally understood why. So, why do you need Clara's help? To find Gallifrey. Impossible. Gallifrey was destroyed, I made sure of that. He did not hide the pain in his voice, so Clara held him. Since I know about your future, do you think I will speak without reason? So, you're saying, you changed the past. All 12 of your regenerations worked together to exile Gallifrey into a pocket dimension that is frozen in time. It was apparently the best way to end the time war and prevent its effect on the world. The doctor looked at him before laughing in madness. 2.47 billion of them. I did not kill them. Are you all right? Asked Clara, but the doctor did not stop his maniacal laughter until a few minutes later. Finally, he rearranged his suit and bow tie. Thank you for telling me. It's fine, you would have found out eventually. Yes, but who knows when? Who knows how long I would have had to carry this burden? True, nodded Edward. So, why do you need to find Gallifrey? For their time technology, he admitted frankly while observing the TARDIS. That's a dangerous thing to want. Edward did not look at him while answering. My family, friends, and trillions of people are counting on to get that technology, and I will do everything possible to succeed. The doctor's two heart skipped a beat. He noticed that person's conviction as it was similar to his back then when he decided to end the time war by all means necessary. He also knew such a conviction was indeed a terrifying thing. Are you a mage? Suddenly asked the doctor, and Edward's body visibly paused. I knew I wouldn't be able to hide it from you, but I did not expect you to figure it out so soon. Mage? Are you talking about magic? Asked Clara. Yes. So, magic is real. It used to be, replied the doctor. What does that mean? Magic was initially a strong force in the universe in ancient times. However, the Time Lord rose to shape the universe, replacing its principles to that of science to underpin reality. You guys can do that. Yes, nodded the doctor. Are you and your people survivors of ancient magical civilization? You don't need to know about my background, replied Edward. All I ask for is that you cooperate and don't get in my way. Once I'm done, I'll leave and we'll never see each other again. Fine, I won't pry any further, but I still have some concerns. What's going to happen to Clara? She'll be fine, she's only acting as a medium or conduit to lead me to my destination. Once her role is done, there won't be any issue. I will take your word for it, commented the doctor. What about Gallifrey? What's going to happen to it? I only need their database. Once I'm done, you can decide whether to leave them in the same state or allow them to return to the universe. The doctor did know how to respond to these words. He knew the corruptions of the Time Lords as a result of their absolute power. It might not be the best idea for such a civilization to return to the universe. Okay, so what should we do? We start with the TARDIS, and here's your thing back. Edward handed him back the sonic screwdriver, an act that surprised him. After a moment, he entered the TARDIS, and Edward followed. He knew he was taking a significant risk by entering the TARDIS as he knew some of the scary things the doctor had in there. However, he considered the latter's peace-loving nature before taking such calculated risks. Of course, he also had preventive measures. After all, they were still in Netheril, his home ground. Morgana, how is it? I've installed a spying software in the screwdriver. Will he find it? Yes, but the crux of the issue is how long before he does. According to my calculations, it should take some time, but I don't know if it's enough before our plan succeeds. Edward secretly nodded. He knew the importance of the thing to the doctor, so he had to monitor it at all times. Of course, he also understood that his unparalleled intelligence was the latter's greatest reliance. That's fine, he nodded. It's a shame we could not directly go to the pocket dimension where Gallifrey is, complained Morgana. The rule of this universe restricted them too much. Hence, their technology was no longer the best and outshined everybody. As such, they cannot be direct and forceful in many things and must plan carefully. Why are you complaining? Didn't we already expect this? 550-time vortex. So, what is the plan? Asked the doctor after entering the TARDIS. Now that he was in his home court, he felt more relieved. First, you have to show us how you travel through time. Our technology cannot adapt to this place, and we cannot use forceful means. All right, anywhere specific. Ancient Greece, said Edward casually. The doctor immediately began to press buttons and move things around. However, the TARDIS immediately began to shake uncontrollably. What's going on? Asked the doctor as he locked a screen before him. Are we dragging your city? Yes, it's my ship, so it must tag along. The doctor was speechless before continuing with his work. He pressed more buttons to input to the TARDIS their newly added weight. Soon, the group found themselves in a tunnel, and Edward's eyes lit up. A screen materialized before him as data collected from Netheril was sent directly. Is this the time vortex? How fascinating, said Edward, immediately engrossed in the data. A dimensional plane where time and space met, intersecting at an angle determined by non-Euclidean geometry. Its essence should be an infinite amount of time energy. The dimension exists outside of time, hence not bound by its rules and restrictions. Edward seemed not to pay attention to his surroundings. No, it's not just time and space. Light, darkness, matter, and energy constantly change, bind, and divide. This place is like a corridor that runs through all of creation. If you find the right pathway, you can traverse anywhere and any time in the universe. Edward was genuinely intrigued by this time vortex and its intricacies. In his home world, time is more like a river that requires subtle manipulation to go upward or downward against powerful currents. However, in this world, time is like a web full of pathways that are hard to navigate. Additionally, time and space are two interconnected concepts in this world, but they are more divided in the Harry Potter world. The time vortex reminded Edward of the warp from Warhammer 40k. However, unlike the warp, which is a dimension made of psychic power, the time vortex is made of time energy. With this method, it should not be a problem to pass the time game, Morgana suddenly said in his mind. Maybe. She was correct since this was a new, innovative method of using time. However, he did know whether some science and technology civilizations did not invent a method that was very similar. Plus, Edward wanted to survive and deal a blow to his opponent. Edward heard a cough and saw the doctor and Clara looking at him oddly. Sorry about that? I understand since there are a few things more interesting than unraveling the truth of the universe. But don't forget our objective. He wanted to finish this chapter of his life and move on and no longer be influenced by the events of the Time War. Give me a few days before we can proceed with the plan, said Edward. Is there a room I can stay in? Yes. The doctor led him to a room in the TARDIS before returning to the deck. Is this person trustworthy? Asked Clara. To an extent. So far, he has not shown us any great malice. By the looks of things, this person seemed to be a scientist at heart but was forced into a terrible situation due to the actions of the Time Lords in ancient times. That's true. But I have a feeling he's very dangerous. Of course, he's dangerous. Do you think I'm not dangerous? Calmly retorted the doctor as he placed his sonic screwdriver in a holder in the main room. After running a diagnostic, he frowned before rerunning it. Inside Edward's room. Do you think he's believing the persona I built? There should be no problem since there is some truth to the lie, replied Morgana. Anyway, we only need to continue until we get what we want. He never planned to conflict with the doctor, which would delay his voyage and complicate things. The next day, Edward walked to the control room. This is the schematic for our plan, said Edward as he showed the doctor a holographic screen with moving parts. The doctor took a look for a few minutes before finally feeling relieved. The device did what Edward said, used Clara as a medium to access his timeline and found Gallifrey. There is room for improvement, suggested the doctor. Please, indicated Edward. Then, he watched how the last Time Lord drastically improved in his device. He took this opportunity to learn and improve the Empire's science and technology. Great work, praised Edward. Oh, this is nothing, replied the doctor coyly. You can print the device yourself, said Edward. Before we start, we have to take precautionary measures. For what? There is no problem with the device. In my experience, things like this often go awry. So, we must take preventive measures. Like what? You should be fine, added Edward. But Ms. Oswald is human and prone to accidents. Firstly, we must find a way to protect her mind or psyche. She will have access to countless versions of herself scattered across time. If something goes wrong, her mind might be broken, turning her into a schizophrenic patient. That's true, but the chances of that happening are very low. Do you want to take the risk? Yes, don't take the risk, added Clara. I can link her mind to the TARDIS core. It should protect her from any complications. Good. Do you have nanobots? Do you want to protect her body from injuries in case of an emergency? That's correct. I don't have it on board now, but I can manufacture some, replied the doctor. How long will it take? Biotechnology is not my strongest suit, so it should take some time. If you trust me, you can use mine, uttered Edward as a syringe appeared in his hand and handed it to the doctor. The latter used his sonic screwdriver to scan this thing. What potent nanites? Is that a good thing? With it, you will be almost immortal. This is my gift to repay you for all the trouble, added Edward. However, he soon saw the hesitation on her face. Don't refuse. In the future, if you meet someone you like and something happens to him, you only need to give him a blood injection, and everything will be fine. Wait, what does that mean? You don't have to worry about it. Anyway, the future is always changing, especially with my presence. So, things might not proceed as I saw them. Clara thanked Edward after staring at him for a few seconds. She then gazed at the doctor, awaiting his decision. Clara, immortality is not a simple thing. Living for a long time can be a curse. With this, can I travel with you for a long time? Yes, but that's more than enough for me, smiled Clara. Plus, can't I just remove them if I want to? All right. The doctor no longer hesitated and injected her with the nanites. Afterward, he began building the device for their plan. He could not wait to see Gallifrey after so long.